is an author, speaker, entrepreneurial, and extreme athlete who was the first man to bear crawl up to Mount Kilimanjaro. He was born with a rare disorder called congenital amputation, which left his arms to end at his elbows and his legs to end at his knees. However, this has not stopped him from leading a very independent life. He does not use prosthetics and uses very minimal assistive technology. He is a world-renowned speaker and motivates others. He is featured and created the documentary, A Fighting Chance, and we are so honored to have him with us today. Can you tell us a little bit about your congenital amputation syndrome?
Yeah, so basically, I don't know a ton about it, but I was born with a condition where the arms end at the elbows and legs end at the knees. When I say I don't know a ton about it, like I don't necessarily know what caused it to happen. It was an unknown cause when I was born, and doctors kind of tried to investigate and try to determine, what had caused it, but I guess there wasn't like a conclusive answer to it. So the best guess they said was amniotic band syndrome potentially, which I didn't know until I didn't even know what that was until I was like 19 years old, and somebody got to write a story for me in Men's Journal, and they wrote about amniotic band syndrome, and that's was like a potential cause for what happened. So it makes a lot of sense. I kind of have like almost like a dimple, on each arm, and the way my feet are formed too, then it makes sense that was probably like a likely cause.
All right. You talk a lot about how you have not used prosthetics over the years. What was the decision, or how was the decision made, whether it be your parents or you, not to use prosthetics?
I think it was more like, so we did try prosthetics when I was younger.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I wore them for a while. Like I wore them into kindergarten, and I tried them again in middle school, but it just like it didn't feel natural. And I think that like being a congenital disability, like it's something that like, however my neurons were wired when I was a kid to like, pick up a toy or pick up a, glass or a spoon or a fork or whatever, or walk around the room. Like it was just like normal for me to do it without the prosthetics on. And so that's where I think, it's definitely a lot different as inside of the community where like you're, born with something versus, something that, happens through an accident or injury or something like that. And you have to kind of like rewire, Yeah. So I think it's, in that way, if you're born with something and you only know one way, then it's like, I don't want to say in that way it's like easier because it's impossible to go and compare, right? But it's like, you only know one way, right? So it's not like we have anything to be able to like go and compare it to. So I think in that way, I'm kind of, grateful for the fact that like, have only known that one perspective, but I have a lot of, friends too that have like, lost limbs in combat and things like that. It's a totally different scenario, I think, when you got to like learn how to redo everything all over again.
Of course. Yeah, and when I speak with a lot of the people that I interview, especially those that have been born with something, I mean, we don't know, including myself, what it's like to, quote unquote, live without deficits. So we all kind of just navigate them as if, they're, we were just, it's just who we are,
Totally.
So, okay. How was it fitting in growing up with your family, socially, if there were any troubles there?
For sure there were troubles. I think at home, like my family tried to make it as normal as possible. So that was like I think it just try to not focus on the disability. You know, my mom and grandma's attitude was like, where the attention goes, the energy flows kind of thing. So it's like, you know, not put the focus on everything that was wrong with stuff. We just didn't really focus or fixate on it a ton, and like try to make things just as normal as possible. But I mean, for sure, it was a very different experience when I was out in the world and, you know, interacting with other people and kids, you know, that were looking or staring, and then it was something that like I think, you know, just kind of had to learn to grow to accept over time, and realize that like having like a more visually apparent disability, like it's kind of something that like goes with it, as opposed to like, you know, I think a lot of disabilities, you know, are more invisible, right? Like I think probably the vast majority of disabilities are invisible. And so it's, you know, can't necessarily look at somebody else and see what they've got going on, and, you know, but I think it is kind of interesting in that way that like every single person on the planet has a disability of some sort. It's probably the one thing that like unites every single person, right?
We all have differences.
Yeah, everybody does in different ways. So it's like, you know, and sometimes I think the biggest disabilities that we have are ones that like exist like internally inside of our, you know, hearts, our minds, our ability to like do what we want to do in the world, or beliefs, or, you know, so much of that, right? Like it's the non-physical things can be far more debilitating, I think, than a lot of the physical ones can.
Right. No, absolutely. And so, you know, when you mentioned that you did, you know, get stares, and, you know, there were times that were really hard. How did you persevere?
I think like with the stairs in particular, it was I don't know, sometimes you just had to be able to like laugh at it, because sometimes it would just be like super absurd. I mean, even when I was a kid, for sure, like it hurt, you know, like it definitely hurt a lot. And, um, you know, sometimes I'd come home and like, you know, cry about it, or just, you know, be really, you know, just kind of emotionally affected and impacted by it. But I think as I got older and began to like learn to accept it more, then it just kind of changed and shifted. And it was like, you know, there'd just be some instances where like you just have to like be able to like laugh about stuff. Like there was you know, like one little girl that like just like was screaming that like I remember me and Joey, who, you know, like we got in the elevator and they were like screaming, it's a pig, you know, and like I was just like, whoa, I don't know what to necessarily do with that, like this little girl saying these things. And it was but it was pretty it was pretty wild just to be able to like sit and be able to just deal with that, you know. And I think it's kind of a unique experience in that way, you know. I don't know, do you get that much with like people that like
Interesting, because like when I was growing up, it was definitely very difficult for me socially, because my right arm was postured, and it can get postured at times now, but I've done so many different types of therapies that it's looser. And often, I mean, because obviously if and when you meet me, you know, you would notice because clearly, you know, but I often will get, you know, people will come up to me, or after I tell them, and they'll be like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know this. So I kind of go, yes. But when I was a child, yeah, growing up for sure, I would get bullied, and, you know, people thought, you know, oh, that's just, you know, the disabled girl, you know, and they were mean for sure. But then when I went off to college, I realized that like my friends or the people that I was interacting with who have become my friends, could care less. I mean, like you said, everyone's got their own difference. And,
totally.
you know, people don't really care as you get older, you know. I think when you're younger, I think people have different, you know, they're not grown up enough to really understand you know, what, somebody looking different, is, to them, it's strange.
Totally. I think it is also like, I don't know, there is an aspect of like authenticity that goes with it too, though, like that I've always admired inside of the kids, like the little girls screaming, like, he's a pig or something, like it was like super awkward at first and just like, whoa. But, at the same time, I'm like, that little girl is like she's so free to express herself in that way.
Yeah.
And that's what like comes out. Like for sure, there's a better like like as you get older and learn more tact and all that. Like that's critical. But I think that there is a freedom of expression inside of like little kids that like I admire.
Of course. And, but when you're little, to be told that you're considered or you look like a pig, I mean, that doesn't feel good.
No, yeah, for sure. And thankfully, I mean, that particular instance happened as an adult, and it was still just like moderately traumatizing.
Of course, absolutely.
But,
I mean, I totally get it. I mean,
yeah,
it's difficult.
yeah. As a kid, though, I don't know. It's I do remember. I mean, like one of my bigger memories was being at like a show and tell class and trying to. That was actually kind of like the day that I decided that I didn't want to wear the prosthetics anymore. Was trying to show off a toy and not being able to do it and failing and like had a like army green machine gun that I brought to school to try to like show and tell, and like I was playing with it and fumbling with it and dropped it and felt immediately helpless and couldn't jump down and like grab it and pick it up, and that was a feeling where I was like, all right, like I want to have anything but that feeling going forward. So taking the prosthetics off was huge. But
Of course.
yeah, it's just interesting how different philosophies and parenting philosophies and all that like makes such a huge difference in terms of the outcomes.
Absolutely. So, how do you navigate the world independently? Someone actually particularly asked me about typing, about putting on your clothes, cooking, eating. How did you learn to do these tasks?
Yeah, so basically just use the ends of my arms to type and eat, right, like hold a spoon, fork, any of that together. Just kind of figured it out how to do that fairly early. If I'm going to pick up a glass, like I just use the ends of my arms to grab hold of it. Same with like a phone, use just the ends of my arms to type about like a pretty decent texting rate. Same as in the typing on the keyboard, type about 50 or 60 words a minute on a typical keyboard, just primarily like talk about video games again. It's like was started as that, like just wanting to be able to play video games and stuff, and then had to figure out how to type messages into chat super fast and drive a fairly minimally adapted vehicle, just have extended pedals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a normal steering wheel, and put the seat a little bit closer to the wheel. And so yeah, it's been pretty minimal adaptations. Like you could jump in my vehicle and drive it, like the pedals that come up that are extended, that I use my left and right feet to hit the gas and the brake, but they're basically out of the way enough that you could jump in and drive my car. So
Right.
Try to keep things as like minimally adapted as possible. I think in it's technology is awesome and great. I'm super grateful for it, but it's also I think can become like a bit of a crutch at times, for anybody, right? Whether like you have a physical disability or not. And then I think when we don't have it, then we become in like kind of in big trouble with that, right? Like if something happened, like God forbid, solar flare or something like that, right? That knocks out the power grid, then like we would quickly realize how, important that is
Right.
to us to have, right? Like like just access to technology and electricity and all those things that we kind of take for granted on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
But try to keep it fairly minimal, and it's been helpful, and in that way.
So what other assistive technologies, even though you keep them minimal, do you use aside from the long pedals when you're driving?
I use assistive touch on my phone.
Okay.
I think that's about it.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Have there been any times, when you've been learning these, especially when you're younger, learning how to do things independently without devices, that you ever got frustrated and, felt hopeless?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, many different instances with that. Like I remember it took me 45 minutes to put my socks on for the first time, and I used a paper clip to do it. Just a brutal struggle to try to like get the socks on. It was when Joey was going to come pick me up and take me to a movie, and so yeah, that was a huge battle. But then eventually like led to being able to like shorten that into taking 15 seconds, 10 or 15 seconds a sock, to put it on just with the ends of my arms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it must have been difficult. So growing up, for instance, with changing, did your sisters and parents help you? Because obviously
they did. Yeah, pretty significantly. Even like using the bathroom was like took a little while to figure out. Like I had a special device that I would have to go and bring to school, and like literally was like a claw arm that I'd go and hook onto my arms and like to reach down under, and that didn't last for too long. Just that carrying that thing around was really kind of an issue. So
you are the first man to bear crawl, quote unquote, up to Mount Kilimanjaro. Can you tell us about this experience and the difficulties you encountered, if any, and the sense of accomplishment you felt after doing this?
Yeah, the biggest thing with the Kilimanjaro climb that doesn't really get as much, I don't really talk about it as much, but it was just the lead up to the climb. It was a really significant, challenge just to get there, to build the team, and kind of everything that went into preparation for the trip. So a lot of times, like if it's in sports, for instance, right? Like we look at like the championship performance as like the thing that we kind of remember that stands out, right? We don't necessarily think about thousands of hours of, bless you, of just practice leading into things, right? To go and get to that great victory. I mean, even like building the shoes and all that stuff to climb the mountain was kind of that was a huge challenge for sure. But to get there and to have the experience of being there on the mountain, it's an incredibly special place too, right? Like it's just probably like the only place in the world where every I think natural climate zone is contained inside of one environment. You've got all the way from like dense green rainforest up to like the tundra on top. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure. And who did you climb with? I know from the videos that I've seen, you were with people clearly. So were there any family members? Did you go with a team, friends, Joey?
Joey was there, and was kind of a core part of the team expedition. Friends Takashi and David filmed it, really grateful for my friend Dan, who helped with, just initially like taping together, bath towels on my arms and my feet to, to hike the mountain, and like just to practice like Stone Mountain in Atlanta, Georgia, where it started. And we rounded out the team. We had two veterans that joined us, Chris and Sandra, and it was really special to have them there as they can, veteran representation on the climb, as well as getting to carry the ashes of a fallen soldier, Corey Johnson, and getting to leave his ashes on the summit was an incredibly special experience. And no barriers was a really big part of it, to help us get connected to the group that we worked with their guides, the K2 Adventure Foundation. So my friends Kevin and Kristen, who have a nonprofit to help kids with disabilities, and so that's they like, if it weren't for them, for Kevin and Kristen, who introduced me to the people that helped make my equipment, like, and I mean, so many different ways, like helped with the funding, with the expedition, helped. I mean, they really like made it possible. And it was a huge process to be able to, pull all the pieces together to make it happen. Also left out my friend Geneva too, who's helped with like kind of the public relations and the media. So we had a team of 9 of us, the American climbers that came over, and then we had a team of close to 30 or 35 African porters, and that they were really like incredible climbers and athletes, and just like, I don't know, it was really special having them there. They were, connected to different tribes that lived around the mountain, and like just, I don't know, I was just hanging with them inside of the cook tents and stuff. Like, it was just really some of the most special parts of the trip, and and seeing them too in terms, and just being in Africa is like, just, it's just such a remarkable and special place. Like, people that have far less than we have in the US that are, living extraordinarily happy lives, and just close and connected to their families, and enjoying just life in so many different ways, like, and going on a safari in Africa too, and seeing all the different stuff. It was really special. So
Sure. And so how long did it take you to get up to the top of these mountains?
The Kilimanjaro climb was 12 days, and Aconcagua in South America was 17 days. And then we did a few other kind of smaller ones along the way.
Okay. And so with climbing, and all the sports that you do, whether it have been, wrestling, whether it be, well, climbing, of course, but with everything that you do sports-wise, how have you managed to keep, your elbows and your knees, where your limbs end, from staying healthy? And this also goes to just performing activities of daily living.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of, like, I think my general attitude is to try to, like, use the tools when necessary again. So like with the climbing, like, there's no way, when I started climbing, I was using bath towels around my arms and my feet, and then eventually had some carbon fiber shoes, which, made such a huge difference. And I think that in terms of keeping things healthy now, like, try to build up some level of like calluses and like, just use my arms and feet on a regular basis, right? Like, and I think if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So that's been a big thing, is just trying to like, even if I go for a while without pushing my wheelchair for a longer distance, then the calluses will eventually like go away, and I'll lose that. And so it's important to be able to, I think, continue to kind of have those calluses built up, but at the same time, like, accept help when other people are offering it too.
So you do use a wheelchair?
I do, yeah. I use a wheelchair. Yep.
So
I guess that is another massive assistive device that I left out. It's add that to the list.
When do you use when do you use a wheelchair versus when do you bear crawl, or use your limbs to move around? Like, I assume like at an airport you're going to use a wheelchair.
Yeah, so like when I'm traveling,
in terms of just speed and efficiency.
Yeah, for sure. Like when I'm traveling a lot, like I'll use the wheelchair and pretty much don't use it at all at home. Just park it in the garage and get around and bear crawl there. If I'm going out to eat at a restaurant, I usually jump out of my chair and into a regular chair, like a movie theater or something like that. And it's I realize how fortunate I am to be able to like transfer into both. And it's the chair especially, like I've had I've had it go down on me before, and in particular in Greece and Israel, had my chair manufacturer, with the shout out to Lasher Sport, they overnighted me a chair part that like saved me. I mean, it was basically like duct taped and zip tied together, and on the trip. So some of my my friends that are like amazing and the hardcore military veterans are like not too gentle on the wheelchair sometimes.
And that's to be it's to be expected. There's people of all different.
I got in trouble for that a lot growing up. Was having like, even Joey or whatever would like ride in the back of the wheelchair, like he would jump on top and ride on the battery, the battery pack, and the electric chair. I used an electric chair for a long time growing up, and but it was kind of just funny because my parents were constantly on my case about that, just having them wreck the the electric chair. It's like $10,000 or something. It's as much as a car, but definitely. I'm trying to think now if there's any other like major adaptive devices that I've left off the list, because I would say a wheelchair is a pretty significant one.
It's funny. I actually wouldn't have even thought about a wheelchair until I've seen your videos, because a lot of what is out there, of you're crawling. So I think it was in a TED talk or something about getting off the wheelchair, whatever the case was. So and until you brought it up, I wouldn't have even thought about it again.
No,
you do almost everything without your wheelchair in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying?
That's and it kind of goes back to like the parenting philosophy too. Like it was like called it the Jedi mind trick, right? Like they didn't focus on the disability a ton, and so therefore like it didn't become a huge deal. I think that like there really is something to like where the attention goes, the energy flows. If we put our focus on everything, that's right. If you just put the focus on the disability, then it's like it becomes a bigger deal than it might need to be, I think. Not saying that we wouldn't have times where we talked about it and acknowledged it. Like I wasn't in denial of the fact that I had a disability, but I think that was a really critical aspect of how they raised me, was to not put too much focus on it. And I think that if you do, then it can become a huge limiting factor. really try to encourage people to have, a good solid knowledge base about whatever it is that they're facing, right? But and maybe even more than your doctors, right? But like, don't like allow those limitations to confine you, and to push the limits as far as you possibly can with the vessel that you've been given.
Absolutely. I totally get it. My parents were very supportive too. You take clearly the physical challenge everywhere you go on a daily basis, with what you do, climbing, obviously physically and so forth. Where do you think that comes from? I mean, you are a man, but like, where do you think that comes from? Because not every person has that strength and determination.
I don't know. I think I love, like, I love the feeling of it for sure. Um, it's, something about like the competition, like especially like makes you better. Like climbing is one thing, right? Like it's competition with yourself. But like I think wrestling or jiu-jitsu, for instance, like those things are like a fight with another human being that is, you know, maybe this resonates with you, maybe not. But like if you have somebody that's like trying to hold you down as hard as they can, and you're trying to get away, it's like in that the feeling of that, like it's a very intense thing that like brings out something different inside of us that that I think it's a level that I've experienced it. Like I can't necessarily get to with like a barbell, or a kettlebells or something like that I would use inside of like a gym or even a mountain. Like for sure, the mountain climbs have, it's a different kind of feeling. It's like probably like a feeling that's like closer to just like that red line of exertion. And again, it gets in a longer thing, so it's like a war of attrition. And the wrestling or jiu-jitsu is like a that intense fight or battle with something else that like just takes it like a different kind of like a deeper level, which is fascinating because I think that see it all throughout nature, right? That like somehow like in the fabric of like existence, like that it's kind of like coded in there that like all of nature struggles and fights in some way, even plants, and competing, right? Like the plants inside of the rainforest are some of the most like highly competitive species on Earth, right? Like it's just iron sharpens iron in different ways. So like I think that's a big aspect of what I really enjoy in those sports.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And so it can be sports wise, it can be, on a daily basis, but what it has been the easiest that's come to you given your limitations, and then what has been the hardest or a challenge for you?
Hardest has been probably confidence with girls.
Okay.
For sure. As when I was growing up, in high school and stuff, like terrified to like, talk to girls or have like the confidence to be able to do that. Felt like a trainer. Asking my senior prom date out was probably one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. But getting to do it was like when she said yes, it almost just like shocked me into realizing that like, wow, like I was going to prom with this girl. Like that was pretty wild. Um, the I think the thing that's come the easiest, and I don't know if this will necessarily make sense, but like I think things kind of like just the revelation that like things are what they are. And so even like if we, I'd fight against it a lot, but like I remember praying to God when I was a kid that like I would just wake up and have arms and legs.
Mm.
And um, I think as soon as I kind of like got over the fact that like that just wasn't going to happen, then it was just easier to accept that. Um, because I think I also know a lot of people that spend a lot of time, you know, wishing that things were different. Um, I I think just accepting things for what they are like allows us to then be able to, enjoy the time that we have left more. Even like, accepting that like the world right now is upside down and chaos, and between just all the challenges that are going on. It's like just stops me to like sit outside and like enjoy the butterflies, to like sniff my puppy's ears, and like enjoy her. Um, and realize that like whatever will be, and to have that like that sense of peace, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of people through, the situation, and I've spoken about this with other people too, really appreciate, quote unquote, the meaning of life, and, what, we kind of take for granted, whether it's going to the barber, for men, or, getting your nails and toes done for women.
Yep.
We didn't have that for 3 months,
Yeah.
So, I
You
mean,
don't know how good it is until it's gone, right? Like, yeah,
exactly.
unfortunately, like we live that way. Yeah.
Right. You preach the philosophy, no excuses. Can you tell us about this philosophy?
Yes. However, I would say there, or it's would be better said that like there are always excuses.
Of course. But I mean,
Like
in terms of
I've
what
never met somebody that's like overcome their excuses like completely, but at the same time, like we're capable of, I think I do believe that we're capable of much more than we give ourselves credit for. I mean, there's a routine excuses that I'll make on a daily basis, but then like I look at that and I'm like, those are opportunities for growth, and I can do better tomorrow, and live differently. Like I think it's more a mindset to like to just not complain about. I mean, it's okay to complain. In fact, like I'm actually learning to like complain. I think it's like a big it's been a big
okay.
goal. um, but to like really, I don't know, just no excuses, like just to live life, and enjoy like this time for what we have. I mean, that's like there couldn't be, tied to what I just talked about, of like everything that's going on right now with COVID and all the challenges of the world, and just not knowing what the future will go and bring. It's like take responsibility for your own life and like go and do something, and just don't complain. Like just go and figure it out. And I think hard times create tough people, and maybe that's what we'll have to go through to be able to get to the other side. I don't know, but I think one way or another we're going to figure it out.
Right, of course. But specifically, I know that in a lot of your speeches, you talk about no excuses in this philosophy. Correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. I just want to make sure. So what, to extent, are you referring to?
To what extent?
Meaning, what is the philosophy around the no excuses to go and reach your fullest potential? Like there's nothing that you can't, that stops you. I know we spoke a little bit about the COVID situation, so I just wanted to know more on a general level what you thought of it.
I think it's relative to each individual, right? Like it's excuses that you make in your life, given the challenges and circumstances that you have, like, are going to be completely different than mine, right? Um, but getting it down to that like very individual level and saying like that you and I are two totally different individuals with two totally different sets of circumstances, but to like, so effectively we're the only ones that can truly tell the truth to ourselves about those things, about the excuses that we're making, but to like have an honest inventory of our lives and figure out like what is it that keeps us from reaching our own personal limits, zenith, you know, whatever that is. And like, what's the incentive to do that in the first place? I think everybody's got to answer that for themselves. I don't think that's, you know, it's, and I think I have that philosophy that like it's within each of us as individuals, as opposed to like looking to things to the outside to make it better. I think it's a internal control, right? That like we are the captain of our fate, and you know, and the masters of our own soul.
Of course, I think it's great, and hopefully other people that are listening and watching our interview can really, you know, take in this philosophy and also quote unquote.
I hope so too. I kind of wonder sometimes, like I've this might not be super motivational, but I've often like, I've just questioned, you know, even free will, right? And it's been I don't necessarily know how or why or what, like it seems as though somehow things are to some degree a bit on like a course or a track. Like each of us, you know, like your path and your journey, like I'd be super interested to know like all the like the details that like led you to like this moment in time, right? And it's kind of is like, if one thing leads to the next. If somebody doesn't say something to you, if somebody doesn't like nudge you this way or that way or whatever, like it just kind of like just changes the course of things. So like, where does that come from? You know, it's there's every action has like a, like there's something preceding it, right? Like there's something that like led to that occurring.
Right.
So it's like, I do think that there's like an aspect of like choice inside of like the present moment, but certainly, you know, at least that the past is written is the future too. I don't know. It's
to be continued.
To be continued.
So I know clearly, as we've spoken about, that you do not use a lot of assistive technology.
Other than wheelchairs.
Right, exactly. But in terms of inclusion and accessibility in the world,
adaptive pedals. So I didn't say that one too. That's another one. Yeah.
But in terms of inclusion and accessibility, where do you think it stands, you know, in the world right now?
I am really proud of America. I think in terms of, you know, the way in which we dealt with it. I've traveled around the world and you know, been to a lot of developing areas of the world, and that you know, it's just harder to get around. And if I didn't have, you know, the full kind of physical faculty to be able to do it, it could be really difficult to go in some places without like a, you know, like a one of those tank style wheelchairs that can climb mountains and stuff, right? Like it's but yet, yeah, I do think that my concern is that, you know, we can definitely move towards making things better. However, like there's like I think in some people's minds, like the idea that like anything like less than perfect is unacceptable. And like I think that like there's no such thing as perfection. And like we are, you know, I mean, ourselves individually and the world in a macro scale and people, right? Like we are imperfect creatures connected to perfection.
Of course.
But like it's, you know, there's like perfection is the enemy of progress, I think, seeking perfection. And I am a perfectionist. You know, one of the main reasons why I've only got one book out, you know, is because I've just like second guessed myself a million different times, you know, and writing another one. So it's like perfect is kind of an illusion. And I think that's what I wish would change more along the lines of like the rounded edges on the world, right? Like I've got, you know, little friends that are like born little versions of me, right? That are quad amputees.
Someone who's dwarfism or a midget, or you're talking
No,
about?
no, I'm not talking about little like in that way. I'm talking like little like young like age, like they were like little kids that are like little me. Like they look very much like I did at a younger age. They're like 4 or 5 years old that are out, you know, playing, you know, t-ball and things like that. And in some communities they're allowed to play, but like in other communities, they aren't. And so it's, you know, in 1997, going back a little while, but like my coach had to like fight super hard for me to have an opportunity to play football. They weren't going to let me do it. So had he not done that, like my life would have taken a very different course, a very different direction.
Right.
It like, I think it would have turned out probably in an interesting ways. Could have been like a, you know, maybe a computer programmer or something like that, you know, like code for video games or something, or maybe something in a totally different direction. But it wouldn't have been in the physical side of things. Like there never would have been any of the mountain climbs or all that. Like, and it's just because like I think the attitude of people wanting to go and take like a rounded edges and like rounding the things, you know, the corners to try to make things as safe as possible. And there was a certain amount of risk with like letting me play, you know, and playing football. The way I tackle people was I'd literally take my helmet and I'd smash it into people's shins as hard as I could to try to take them down. And not only is that mostly illegal to tackle people that way in like normal football, it's also extraordinarily dangerous from head injuries and like in spinal injuries, right? But had that not occurred, then I would have never wrestled. Had I never wrestled, there would have been no, you know, MMA or weightlifting or mountain climbing. So it's just an interesting kind of like causality in that way, right? Like it's, I think, fighting for people to have opportunities to be able to, you know, to play, you know, and that's it, you know, it's a delicate balance there too, because I get like on the flip side, we were talking about the other day, it was with my family talking about you know, the I think it was Oscar, the South African who ran with the prosthetics that like he was accused of like having an unfair advantage over everybody because he's running with the prosthetics.
I know who you're talking about. I can't figure out his name right now, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you know the story. I mean, he also had the big murder trial and all that with his right. So like, but he is an example of like kind of the first time where somebody had like a physical, maybe not the first time, but he was an example of somebody where like there was like a potential argument for the fact that he had like a intense, you know, mechanical advantage, right? Like, and there was an argument in when I wrestled as to whether or not like I had a huge unfair advantage in wrestling. And, you know, I found that interesting because a lot of the parents when I first started, like they were saying that, you know, it's basically borderline child abuse that my mom and dad were, you know, making me do it and making me wrestle because I was so bad at first. And then eventually got to be a lot better that people were saying that I was like unfairly advantaged. were the kids. So it's just kind of funny to see people's like reactions change over time. And there are just no easy answers with those kind of questions. It's just an interesting conversation to have, I think.
For sure. Now, lastly, by sharing your story, which is very inspirational, what do you want others to take away?
I hope that they take away that like no matter how like big you feel the odds are stacked against you, that like you can be the captain of your fate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big aspect of it. Like, guide your ship in your life in the direction that you want to see it go, and fight for that.
Right. Sure. I think that's a great message. Well,
Thank you.
So wonderful, Kyle. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, absolutely.